The emergency beacon screamed across 17 different frequencies, its distress call piercing through the void of space like a desperate cry for help. On the bridge of the Galactic Federation cruiser Harmony's Light, Captain Zethkar's 4 eyes widened in alarm as the translation matrix decoded the message. All available Federation forces, this is Colony Ship New Haven requesting immediate military assistance. We are under attack by Scaran raiders in the Outer Rim. Our defenses are failing. Civilian population of 40,000 souls aboard. We have perhaps 6 hours before complete system failure. The bridge fell silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems. Zethakar's tentacles curled nervously around his command chair as he processed the gravity of the situation. The Scaran raiders were notorious throughout the galaxy for their brutality, leaving no survivors and taking no prisoners. They were efficient killers who struck isolated colonies and ships for sport as much as profit. Communications, patch me through to High Command immediately, Zethkar ordered, his voice carrying the weight of urgency. The response from Admiral Velkoth came within minutes, but it wasn't what anyone wanted to hear. Captain, I'm afraid we have no available forces in that sector. The 3rd Fleet is engaged with Kronak separatists near the Vale Nebula, and the 7th Fleet won't reach that position for another 18 hours. Zethkar felt his heart sink. 40,000 civilians, including thousands of younglings, would be slaughtered while the mighty Galactic Federation stood helplessly by. The irony wasn't lost on him that their most advanced civilization spanning 300 worlds couldn't protect a single colony ship. Sir, his communications officer, a young Viridian named Jexna, spoke up hesitantly. There is one possibility. Long-range sensors are detecting a small patrol vessel approximately 4 hours from the New Haven's position. Excellent. Zethkar's relief was palpable. What class? Dreadnought? Battlecruiser? Jexna's green-tinged skin seemed to pale further. Actually, sir, it appears to be a single light frigate. Registry shows it's from Earth. The bridge crew exchanged worried glances. Earth was one of the newest members of the Galactic Federation, having joined only 3 cycles ago. Their technology was primitive by galactic standards, their ships barely faster than light, and their weapons systems were considered quaint relics compared to plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes. Earth? Zethkar repeated, his voice carrying a mix of disbelief and growing desperation. Those are the beings from the Death World, aren't they? The ones who somehow survived on a planet with active tectonic plates and weather systems that could kill most civilized species? The same, sir. Intelligence reports classify their homeworld as a Class 12 Death World. Gravity nearly twice standard poisonous atmosphere for most species, and weather patterns that regularly generate storms capable of leveling cities. Despite the dire circumstances, Zethkar found himself curious about these strange beings. How had creatures from such a hostile environment even developed space travel? Most Death Worlds never produced sentient life, and those that did rarely lived long enough to reach the stars. Send them the distress call anyway, Zethkar decided. Protocol demands we alert all vessels in the area, regardless of their limitations. The message was transmitted across subspace, carrying with it little hope but fulfilling their duty to try everything possible. The response came back faster than expected, in crude but understandable galactic standard. Federation vessel, this is UNSC Defiant responding to distress call. We copy 40,000 civilians under attack by raiders. We are adjusting course and will arrive in 3.7 hours. Tell them to hold on. Zethkar blinked all 4 eyes in succession. Did they just say they're responding? A single light frigate against an entire Scaran raiding fleet? Sir, Jexna checked her instruments again. The New Haven is reporting the raiders have 17 heavy assault vessels and at least 30 fighter craft. That's enough firepower to level a small moon. The gravity of the situation settled over the bridge like a funeral shroud. These humans, these Death Worlders, were flying straight into what could only be described as a massacre. Their primitive vessel would be torn apart before they could even fire a shot. Try to raise them again, Zethkar ordered. Make sure they understand what they're flying into. UNSC Defiant, be advised you are approaching a superior force of 17 heavy raiders and 30 fighters. Your vessel appears to be limited in defensive capabilities. Perhaps you should wait for additional Federation support. The human response came back with what sounded almost like amusement in the voice. Acknowledged, Federation vessel. 17 heavies and 30 fighters. We've faced worse odds before breakfast. Defiant out. Zethkar stared at the communications console as if it had personally offended him. Either these humans were incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Given that they'd evolved on a death world, he suspected it might be both. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "I'm receiving additional transmissions from the Defiant. They appear to be..."
Singing?
"Singing?" "Yes, sir. It's some sort of rhythmic chanting. Our translation matrix is having difficulty with the cultural context, but it seems to be about violence and victory in battle." As the hours passed, updates from the New Haven grew increasingly desperate. Their shields were failing, hull breaches were spreading, and the Scarran raiders were methodically dismantling their defenses. Captain Yorthal of the colony ship sent increasingly frantic messages as his people prepared for the inevitable. "Federation vessels, this is New Haven. We have lost main engines and our shields are down to 12%. The raiders are demanding our surrender, but we know what that means. We're preparing to evacuate as many civilians as possible to the escape pods, though I fear it won't matter in the end." Then, exactly 3 hours and 42 minutes after the first distress call, something appeared on the edge of the New Haven sensor range. A single ship, barely larger than a patrol craft, emerged from faster-than-light travel with the kind of precision that spoke of either incredible skill or incredible luck. The UNSC Defiant had arrived, and with it, everything was about to change in ways that no one in the galaxy could have possibly predicted. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UNSC Defiant, her calm brown eyes surveying the tactical display, with the kind of cold assessment that came from years of experience in humanity's bloodiest conflicts. At 34, she was young for a ship commander, but the scars on her hands and the steel in her voice told the story of someone who had earned her position through fire and determination. "Captain," Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez called from the tactical station, "we're getting a clear picture of the situation now. 17 Scarran heavy raiders in a loose formation around the colony ship. They're taking their time, probably savoring the fear." "Typical raider mentality," Chen replied, her voice carrying the kind of disgust reserved for bullies who preyed on the helpless. "They think they're apex predators because they've never met real resistance." The bridge crew of the Defiant was small but efficient. 12 humans who had served together through the Proxima Rebellion and the Mars Liberation Campaign. They'd faced impossible odds before, though never quite like this. The ship itself was a marvel of human engineering born from necessity rather than elegance. Where alien vessels were sleek and graceful, the Defiant was angular and brutal, covered in reactive armor and bristling with weapons that reflected humanity's approach to warfare. "Ma'am," Ensign Park spoke up from communications, "we're receiving another transmission from the colony ship. They're asking if we have any requests for their final message to their families." Chen's jaw tightened. In her experience, anyone who gave up before the shooting started had already lost. "Open a channel to the New Haven. Colony ship New Haven, this is Captain Chen of the UNSC Defiant. Belay that final message talk. We're here to get you out of this mess, not to write your obituary." The response came back tinged with disbelief and what might have been hope. "Captain Chen, we appreciate your courage, but you can't possibly understand what you're facing. Scarran raiders are among the most feared forces in the galaxy. They've never been defeated in open combat." "Then I guess today's going to be full of firsts," Chen replied. "All hands, this is the captain. We are going weapons hot. I want full combat readiness in 60 seconds. The transformation of the Defiant was immediate and terrifying. Weapon systems that had been hidden beneath retractable armor plating emerged like the fangs of some mechanical predator. Point defense systems calibrated themselves with mechanical precision, while the ship's fusion reactor ramped up to full combat power. "Captain," Rodriguez reported, "the raiders have noticed us. They're laughing." Chen allowed herself a cold smile. "Put their communications on speaker." The bridge filled with the guttural, sneering voices of the Scarran raiders speaking in broken galactic standard. "Little ship from little species. You come to die with colony ship? We make quick death for you if you turn away now. Transmission for you, Captain," Chen told Rodriguez. Rodriguez keyed the communications with obvious pleasure. "Scarran vessels, this is the UNSC Defiant. You have attacked civilians under Federation protection. You have exactly 30 seconds to withdraw from this system before we demonstrate why humanity earned its place in the Galactic Federation." The laughter from the raider channels was even louder this time. The lead raider vessel, a massive dreadnought covered in trophies from previous victims, moved closer to the tiny human ship. Little Deathworlders think they strong because they survive harsh planet. We show you what real strength looks like. Weapons range in 30 seconds, Rodriguez reported. All stations report ready, came the calls from around the bridge. Chen stood up from her command chair and straightened her uniform. There was something almost ritualistic about the way she prepared for battle, as if she was channeling not just her own experience, but the collective fighting spirit of her entire species. Listen up, she announced to her crew. Those raiders think they know what death looks like because they've spent their lives killing the defenseless. They're about to learn the difference between causing death and being death. The tactical display showed the human ship as a tiny dot surrounded by massive red contacts representing the Scaran fleet. By every metric of civilized warfare, this should have been a massacre. The raiders had superior numbers, superior firepower, and superior defenses. What they didn't have was any understanding of what they were really facing. Captain Chen, came another transmission from the New Haven. Please, you must reconsider. These raiders have destroyed Federation task forces twice your size. Your sacrifice won't save us, it will only add to the body count. New Haven, you're thinking about this all wrong, Chen replied. This isn't a sacrifice. This is pest control. The raiders began their attack with the kind of arrogant confidence that came from centuries of unchallenged dominance. Energy beams lanced out from their heavy weapons, designed to cripple the human ship's engines and leave it helpless for the killing blow. But the Defiant wasn't where they expected it to be. The human ship moved with an agility that defied its apparent mass, twisting through the energy barrage like a dancer avoiding raindrops. Reactive armor absorbed hits that should have been devastating, while the ship's exotic matter drive allowed for acceleration patterns that left the raiders' targeting systems struggling to keep up. Their movement patterns make no sense, and one of the raider captains transmitted to his fleet. No ship that size should be able to maneuver like that. What the raiders didn't understand was that every human ship was built by people who had spent their entire evolutionary history on a world that was actively trying to kill them. Every system was designed with redundancy and survival in mind. Every maneuver was planned by minds that had learned to think 3 steps ahead of disaster. Bringing us around to attack Vector 7, Chen announced. All weapons target the lead dreadnought. Let's teach them the first lesson. The Defiant streaked toward the massive raider flagship like a bullet fired from the hand of an angry god. The raiders, expecting the human ship to maintain a respectful distance and engage in the kind of long-range energy weapon exchanges that characterized most galactic warfare, were completely unprepared for what happened next. The human ship closed to point-blank range faster than anyone thought possible, then unleashed a fury of destruction that redefined what the word violence meant in this corner of the galaxy. The first salvo from the UNSC Defiant introduced the Scaran raiders to the concept of kinetic warfare in the most violent way possible. While the galaxy had moved to energy-based weapons centuries ago, humanity had taken a different approach. When your homeworld regularly threw asteroids at you via meteor showers and hurricanes that could level mountains, you learned to appreciate the simple, devastating effectiveness of mass times velocity. The magnetic accelerator cannon mounted along the Defiant's spine fired a tungsten rod the size of a telephone pole at a significant fraction of light speed. The projectile struck the Raider dreadnought's shields with the force of a small nuclear weapon, causing the entire energy barrier to collapse in a cascade of failing systems and overloaded generators. What was that? The Raider captain screamed across the communications channel. That wasn't a plasma beam or quantum torpedo. That, Captain Chen replied with grim satisfaction, was physics. The second shot punched through the dreadnought's armor like it was made of paper, tearing a hole clean through the ship from bow to stern. The massive Raider vessel, which had terrorized the outer rim for decades, began venting atmosphere and secondary explosions as critical systems failed throughout its hull. But the Defiant wasn't done. As the human ship swept past the crippled dreadnought, its point defense systems came online. What the Raiders had mistaken for standard anti-missile batteries were actually close-in weapons systems designed to shred anything that came within range. Streams of high-velocity projectiles tore into the Raider ship's superstructure, turning what had been a proud warship into a drifting wreck in the span of 30 seconds. Impossible. Another Raider captain's voice cracked with disbelief. The Bloodfang was our most powerful vessel. How did one tiny ship destroy it so quickly? Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez checked his tactical display and smiled. Captain, we're getting movement from the raider fleet. They're trying to surround us. Let them, Chen replied. Helm, bring us about. Target the 3 raiders on our starboard side. Time to show them what happens when you corner a predator. The Defiant moved like a ship possessed, its exotic matter drive allowing for maneuvers that violated several known laws of physics. Where other species had focused on creating elegant, efficient propulsion systems, humanity had built drives that could literally bend space-time around their ships, allowing for acceleration, patterns that would turn most alien crews into paste. The 3 Scarran raiders that had moved to intercept the human ship found themselves facing something unprecedented in their experience. Instead of the predictable energy weapon exchanges they expected, they were engaged by a vessel that fought like a wild animal, using every dirty trick in the book. The Defiant launched a spread of what appeared to be standard missiles, causing the raiders to activate their point defense systems and prepare for a conventional attack. What they got instead was a cloud of smart mines that dispersed throughout their formation, each one equipped with enough explosive power to crack a ship's hull and the intelligence to target the most vulnerable points. The explosions lit up space like a deadly fireworks display. 2 of the 3 raiders were crippled immediately, their engines destroyed and their weapons offline. The 3rd managed to return fire, sending a volley of plasma beams toward the human ship. Chen watched the energy weapons approach with the calm of someone who had faced much worse. Brace for impact. The plasma beams struck the Defiant's armor with tremendous force, but instead of the devastating damage the raiders expected, the human ship seemed to shrug off the attack. What they didn't know was that every plate of the ship's hull was designed to absorb and distribute energy impacts, a technology born from protecting human settlements against solar flares and cosmic radiation. Their weapons barely scratched us, Rodriguez reported with obvious amazement. That's because they're designed to fight civilized opponents, Chen explained. We're not civilized. We're survivors. The surviving raider ship tried to retreat, but the Defiant was already moving to intercept. The human ship's weapons had been designed by people who understood that in a real fight, there were no rules and no mercy for those who preyed on the innocent. A focused beam of coherent particles, originally developed for mining operations on asteroids, sliced through the raider's engine section like a hot knife through butter. The ship went dead in space, its crew trapped in a metal coffin that was slowly losing life support. Across the battlefield, the remaining Scarran ships were beginning to understand that they had encountered something completely outside their experience. These weren't the soft, civilized species they usually preyed upon. These were Deathworlders, beings forged in the crucible of a planet that had tried to kill them for millions of years. All raiders, this is Commander Thaknor. The voice of the raider fleet's second-in-command crackled across the communications. Concentrate all fire on the human ship. Bring everything we have. The response was immediate and overwhelming. 14 remaining raider vessels opened fire simultaneously, filling space with enough destructive energy to reduce a small moon to cosmic dust. Plasma beams, quantum torpedoes, and exotic particle weapons all converged on the tiny human ship. And then, something happened that redefined everyone's understanding of what was possible in space: combat. The Defiant didn't try to dodge the incoming barrage. Instead, it accelerated directly into the attack, its adaptive armor systems reconfiguring themselves to present the smallest possible target profile, while its defensive systems prepared to demonstrate why humanity had never lost a war once they decided to fight it. Captain Chen stood on her bridge, watching the wall of destruction approaching her ship, and smiled the kind of smile that had once made Earth's predators think twice about hunting humans. All hands, she announced over the ship's intercom. We are about to show these raiders why their ancestors should have stayed hidden in whatever hole they crawled out of. The energy weapon struck the Defiant with the force of a dying star, and for a moment space itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, through the chaos and destruction, something impossible happened. The human ship emerged from the barrage not only intact, but angry. The UNSC Defiant emerged from the concentrated fire of 14 raider ships like a phoenix rising from flames. Where the aliens expected to see a debris field, they instead witnessed something that challenged their fundamental understanding of warfare and technology. The human ship's adaptive armor had not just absorbed the massive energy discharge, but had somehow converted it into additional power for their systems. Energy absorption at 140% of normal capacity, Rodriguez reported, his voice filled with the kind of professional calm that came from serving aboard humanity's warships. All systems showing green across the board. We're actually running hotter than when we started. Captain Chen nodded with grim satisfaction. That's the beauty of overkill, Rodriguez. Our ancestors learned to survive everything from volcanic eruptions to ice ages. A little weapons fire isn't going to stop us now. The silence from the raider fleet was deafening. Across 14 ships, crews that had spent their entire lives believing in their own invincibility were staring at their sensor readings in complete disbelief. Their most powerful weapons, fired simultaneously with perfect coordination, had not only failed to destroy the human ship, but had somehow made it stronger. "This is impossible," Commander Thaknor transmitted, his voice shaking with something between rage and fear. "No ship can survive that kind of concentrated fire." "You're thinking about this wrong," Chen replied, her voice carrying across the communication channels with deadly calm. "You're trying to apply the rules of civilized warfare to people who evolved in hell. We don't fight by your rules because your rules are designed for species that never had to face extinction every few thousand years." To prove her point, the Defiant began what could only be described as a systematic dismantling of the raider fleet. Instead of engaging in the traditional long-range energy weapon duels that characterized most galactic warfare, the human ship moved like a predator that had found its prey. The next target was a heavy cruiser that had been positioning itself for a flanking maneuver. The Defiant closed to knife-fighting range before the raiders could react, its exotic matter drive allowing for acceleration patterns that should have been impossible for a ship of its size. At point-blank range, the human ship unleashed a weapon that redefined the concept of overkill. The nuclear-pumped Grazer had been developed for clearing asteroid fields, but in the hands of human military engineers, it had become something far more terrifying. A focused beam of gamma radiation, powered by a controlled nuclear explosion, struck the raider cruiser with enough energy to sterilize a continent. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. The raider ship didn't explode so much as it simply ceased to exist in any meaningful way. One moment it was a 300-meter warship. The next it was a rapidly expanding cloud of superheated plasma and elementary particles. "What kind of monsters are these humans?" One of the surviving raider captains screamed across the communications. "The kind that survived on a death world," Chen replied. "The kind that learned to fight by rules you can't even imagine." But the Defiant was just getting started. As the human ship continued its attack run, it deployed a series of weapons that demonstrated humanity's unique approach to space combat. Where other species had focused on elegant energy weapons and sophisticated targeting systems, humans had built tools of destruction based on the simple principle that anything could be a weapon if you threw it hard enough. A cloud of smart munitions spread out from the human ship, each one no larger than a coffee cup, but equipped with enough intelligence and explosive power to cripple a ship. They moved with the coordinated precision of a swarm of insects, seeking out the most vulnerable points on each raider vessel and striking with surgical precision. Engines exploded. Weapon systems went dark. Life support failed. Within minutes, half of the remaining raider fleet was crippled and drifting, their crews trapped in metal coffins slowly losing power and air. "This isn't warfare," Commander Thaknor transmitted, his voice now openly terrified. "This is extermination. You should have thought of that before you decided to prey on civilians," Chen replied coldly. "But don't worry. We'll make this quick." The Defiant moved through the raider formation like death itself, its weapons system cycling through an arsenal that spoke to humanity's long history of finding new and creative ways to destroy their enemies. Kinetic weapons that fired projectiles at relativistic speeds, particle beams that could cut through solid matter like butter, explosive devices that could turn a ship's own hull into shrapnel. But perhaps most terrifying of all was the way the human ship fought. There was no honor in it, no mercy, no adherence to the civilized rules of engagement that governed warfare between the galaxy's more advanced species. The humans fought like cornered animals, using every dirty trick and underhanded tactic that their violent evolution had taught them. They targeted life support systems instead of weapons. They used the raiders' own tactics against them, striking at the weak and vulnerable while avoiding direct confrontation with the strong. They fought not to win glory or prove their superiority, but to ensure that their enemies could never threaten innocence again. Captain Yorthal of the colony ship New Haven watched the battle unfold on his sensors with growing amazement and horror. In all his years of space travel, he had never seen anything like this. A single ship, outnumbered 17-1, was systematically destroying an entire raider fleet with the kind of ruthless efficiency that belonged in nightmares. Communications, he ordered his bridge crew. Try to raise the human ship. UNSC Defiant, this is the New Haven. Captain Chen, what you're doing it's incredible. We thought we were all going to die. Chen's response came back immediately, though her voice carried the strain of someone fighting a desperate battle. Captain Yorthal, you're not dead yet, and if I have anything to say about it, you're not going to be. Just keep your people safe and let us handle the pest problem. But even as she spoke, Captain Chen knew that the battle was far from over. The raiders were starting to adapt to her tactics, and their sheer numbers were beginning to tell. The Defiant was tough, but it wasn't invincible, and eventually even the best armor and shields would fail under sustained assault. It was time to escalate. Captain Chen stood in the center of her bridge, watching as the tactical display showed the remaining raider ships beginning to coordinate their attacks more effectively. The element of surprise was gone, and the Scaran commanders were finally starting to understand what they were facing. Fear, it seemed, was an excellent teacher. Captain, Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez called from his station. The raiders are pulling back to maximum engagement range. They're trying to use their numerical advantage to wear us down with sustained fire. Smart of them, Chen acknowledged. Too bad for them that we didn't come here to play by their rules. The truth was that the Defiant had been holding back, not out of mercy or any sense of fair play, but because humanity's approach to warfare was fundamentally different from what the galaxy considered civilized combat. Where other species saw war as a continuation of politics by other means, humans saw it as a problem to be solved permanently. Rodriguez, patch me through to the fleet. All raider vessels, this is Captain Chen. You've seen what we can do when we're being polite. You have exactly 60 seconds to surrender unconditionally and prepare to be boarded. Or I'm going to show you why humanity has never lost a war once we decided to fight it. The response from Commander Thaknor was immediate and filled with renewed bravado, though Chen could detect the underlying fear in his voice. Human witch, you may have destroyed some of our ships through trickery and cowardice, but we still outnumber you. We are Scaran raiders. We do not surrender to inferior species. Chen looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. These were people who had been born on a world that regularly tried to kill everything living on it. They had grown up breathing poisonous air, drinking water that could corrode metal, and learning to fight predators that viewed humans as convenient snacks. The idea of surrendering to pirates was so foreign to their nature that several of them actually laughed. Well, Chen said with the kind of smile that had once made Earth's apex predators reconsider their career choices. I tried to be reasonable. She turned to her weapons officer, a scarred veteran named Kowalski, who had earned his position during the siege of Europa Station. Chief, prepare the Hellfire Protocol. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of machinery. Even among humanity's military, the Hellfire Protocol was spoken of in whispers. It was a tactic so devastating, so completely without mercy, that it was only authorized in the most extreme circumstances. Ma'am, Kowalski said quietly. Are you sure? Once we initiate Hellfire, there's no going back. They had their chance, Chen replied. They chose to threaten 40,000 civilians instead. Execute the protocol. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. The UNSC Defiant suddenly accelerated to what should have been impossible speeds, its exotic matter drive pushing the boundaries of known physics. But instead of attacking the raiders directly, the human ship began what could only be described as a complex dance through space. What are they doing? One of the raider captains transmitted in confusion. They're not targeting any of our ships, that was true, but they were targeting something far more fundamental. The Defiant was deploying a series of devices throughout the battle space, each one no larger than a briefcase but containing technology that represented the absolute pinnacle of human military engineering. Space mines. But not the crude explosive devices that most species used. These were quantum entanglement bombs, each one capable of creating a localized space-time distortion that would tear apart anything within a 50-kilometer radius. And the Defiant was placing them with mathematical precision throughout the raider formation. Captain, Rodriguez reported with professional calm. All mines are in position. We have 17 quantum devices deployed in a perfect sphere around the Raider fleet. Chen nodded. Signal the colony ship to move to minimum safe distance. Then give the Raiders one final warning. All Scaran vessels, this is your last chance. You are now surrounded by quantum entanglement devices. Each one is capable of destroying everything in a 50-kilometer radius. You have 30 seconds to surrender, or I will demonstrate why humanity earned its place in the Galactic Federation by being too dangerous to ignore. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of terrified conversations across the Raider fleet. They were trapped in a sphere of destruction, surrounded by weapons that violated several galactic treaties on weapons of mass destruction. But those treaties had been written by civilized species who had never faced extinction as a regular fact of life. You're bluffing, Commander Thaknor transmitted, though his voice lacked any real conviction. No species would use such weapons. The collateral damage would be enormous. Commander, Chen replied with deadly calm, you seem to be under the impression that we care about collateral damage to people who prey on civilians. Let me correct that misunderstanding. She nodded to Kowalski, who activated a single quantum mine positioned at the edge of the formation. The device detonated with the force of a small star going nova, creating a sphere of absolute destruction that consumed everything within its radius. When the light faded, there was nothing left but empty space and rapidly dissipating energy. That was just one mine, Chen announced. We have 16 more positioned throughout your formation. Each one is independently targeted and remotely detonated. You cannot shoot them all before we trigger them, and you cannot escape the blast radius before detonation. The effect on the Raider fleet was immediate and devastating. These were beings who had spent their lives terrorizing the helpless, safe in the knowledge that their superior numbers and firepower made them invincible. They had never faced an opponent who was not only willing but eager to die in order to ensure their enemy's destruction. We surrender. The transmission came from multiple ships simultaneously, as Raider captains who had never known fear suddenly understood what it meant to face an opponent who fought without any regard for their own survival. All Raiders, power down your weapons immediately and prepare to be boarded. Any ship that shows hostile intent will be destroyed instantly. But Chen wasn't finished yet. As the Raider ships began powering down their weapon systems, she opened a channel to the colony ship. New Haven, this is the Defiant. Threat has been neutralized. All civilians are safe. Captain Yurthal's voice came back filled with wonder and gratitude. Captain Chen, what you've done here today? It's impossible. A single ship against an entire Raider fleet, how? Chen smiled, and for the first time since the battle began, there was genuine warmth in her expression. Captain, you have to understand something about humans. We didn't reach the stars because we were the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. We reached the stars because we were too stubborn to die. As the Defiant began the process of securing the surrendered Raider vessels, word of the battle was already spreading across the galaxy. The humans, the newcomers from the death world that most species couldn't even visit without life support, had just accomplished something that seasoned military analysts would have deemed impossible. But for Captain Chen and her crew, it was just another day at the office. After all, when you've spent your entire evolutionary history fighting a planet that actively tried to kill you, a few pirates hardly seemed worth getting excited about. 3 hours after the surrender of the Scaran Raider fleet, the UNSC Defiant found itself hosting what could only be described as the galaxy's most uncomfortable diplomatic meeting. Captain Chen sat across from Commander Thaknor in the ship's interrogation room, studying the defeated Raider leader with the cold assessment of a predator evaluating prey. Thaknor was a typical Scaran, standing nearly 3 meters tall with chitinous armor plating and mandibles that clicked nervously as he spoke. His species had evolved as apex predators on a world where strength meant survival, and they had carried that philosophy into space. Until today, they had never met anything that could challenge their dominance. I don't understand, Thaknor said for the third time, his voice carrying a mixture of confusion and fear. Your ship is inferior. Your technology is primitive. Your weapons should not have been able to penetrate our defenses. Chen leaned back in her chair, studying the alien with the same expression she might use to examine an interesting insect. You keep using that word, inferior. I don't think it means what you think it means. But it does. Thaknor's mandibles clicked faster. Our ships are larger, our weapons more powerful, our defenses stronger. By every metric of galactic warfare, we should have crushed you. You're absolutely right, Chen agreed. By the standards of galactic warfare, you should have won easily. But here's the thing about humanity, Commander. We don't fight by galactic standards. We fight by Earth standards, and Earth has been trying to kill everything on it for 4 billion years. She stood up and walked to the small viewport that looked out onto the debris field that had once been the most feared raider fleet in the Outer Rim. Do you know what the mortality rate was for early human space exploration? 93%. Do you know why we kept doing it anyway? Because dying in space was still safer than staying on Earth. Thaknor stared at her with growing comprehension and horror. You're saying your entire species is insane? No, Chen replied calmly. We're saying that sanity is a luxury we could never afford. When your homeworld regularly throws continent-sized chunks of ice at you, you learn to think fast and hit hard. When your atmosphere is literally poisoned to most galactic species, you learn to be tough. When your planet's weather systems can level cities, you learn that sometimes the only way to survive is to be more dangerous than everything else around you. Meanwhile, throughout the ship, the rescued civilians from the New Haven were getting their first real look at humanity's approach to space travel. The Galactic Federation had designed their ships to be comfortable and elegant, with spacious corridors, soothing lighting, and every amenity that advanced civilization could provide. The Defiant, by contrast, looked like it had been designed by paranoid engineers who expected to be attacked by everything from pirates to cosmic phenomena. Every surface was functional, every system had multiple backups, and every compartment could be sealed against vacuum in case of hull breach. This is incredible, Captain Yorthal whispered as Chen gave him a tour of the bridge. Your entire ship is built like a fortress. Actually, Chen corrected, it's built like a survival shelter. The fortress part is just a bonus. She showed him the armor plating that could absorb energy weapons fire and convert it to power, the redundant life support systems that could keep the crew alive even if 3/4 of the ship was destroyed. The weapon systems that had been designed not for elegant warfare but for absolute annihilation of anything that threatened human survival. How do you live like this? Yorthal asked, his voice filled with wonder and concern. How do you function knowing that your entire civilization is built around the assumption that everything is trying to kill you? Chen smiled, and for a moment, Yorthal caught a glimpse of something that explained how humanity had not only survived on their death world, but had thrived there. Captain, you're looking at this backwards. We don't live in fear of death. We live in spite of it. Every human who made it to space did so because they were descended from people who looked at a hostile universe and said, "We're going to make this work anyway." The rescue operation continued for several hours as the Defiant processed the surrendered raiders and ensured the safety of the civilian population. But word of the battle was already spreading across the galaxy at faster than light speeds, carried by traders, diplomats, and military observers who had monitored the engagement from a safe distance. In the halls of the Galactic Federation Council, emergency sessions were being called as military analysts tried to understand what they had witnessed. A single human frigate had not only defeated but completely dominated a raider fleet that had been terrorizing the Outer Rim for decades. This changes everything, Admiral Velkoth transmitted to Captain Zethkar aboard the Harmony's Light. We need to completely reassess our understanding of human military capabilities. Zethkar, who had been monitoring the battle from beginning to end, found himself in the uncomfortable position of having to explain to his superiors that humanity's newest members might also be their most dangerous. Sir, I don't think we fully understood what we were dealing with when we accepted their membership application. Explain. Admiral, they didn't just win that battle. They won it so decisively that the raiders surrendered, rather than face complete annihilation. And they did it with technology that we classified as primitive. There was a long pause before Admiral Velkoth responded. Captain, I want you to compile a full report on this engagement. Every detail, every tactic, every weapon system used. If the humans are this effective in combat, we need to understand why. But understanding humanity's approach to warfare required understanding humanity itself. And that was proving to be a challenge for species that had evolved in relatively peaceful environments. How do you explain a civilization that had developed space travel, not to explore the stars but to escape a planet that regularly tried to exterminate them? How do you describe a species that viewed warfare not as a political tool, but as a survival mechanism that had been refined over millions of years of evolution? How do you comprehend people who had learned to fight not for glory or conquest, but simply for the right to continue existing? Back aboard the Defiant, Captain Chen was receiving a transmission from Earth Command that would change everything once again. Captain Chen, this is Admiral Martinez. Outstanding work on the rescue operation. However, we've received intelligence that suggests this was not an isolated incident. The Scaran raiders were apparently working for someone, and that someone is not happy that you've disrupted their operations. Chen felt her stomach tighten. In her experience, when someone said the situation was about to get worse, they were usually right. What kind of someone, Admiral? The kind with a battle fleet, Captain. Long-range sensors are detecting a Kronex hegemony task force moving toward your position. Estimated arrival time is 6 hours. The bridge fell silent. The Kronex hegemony was one of the galaxy's major military powers, with technology that made the Scaran raiders look like children playing with toys. If they were behind the raider attacks, then humanity had just made an enemy that could potentially destroy entire star systems. Orders, Admiral. Protect those civilians, Captain. We're sending reinforcements, but they won't arrive for at least 12 hours. You're going to have to hold the line until help arrives. Chen looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. They had just won what most species would consider an impossible victory, and now they were being asked to do it again against opponents who were exponentially more dangerous. Understood, Admiral. The Defiant will hold position. As the transmission ended, Chen realized that the galaxy was about to learn another lesson about humanity. The first lesson had been that humans were dangerous when provoked. The second lesson was about to be that humans were absolutely terrifying when they had something to protect. The Kronex hegemony task force that emerged from faster-than-light travel 6 hours later was a sight that would have struck fear into the hearts of any civilized military force in the galaxy. 12 massive dreadnoughts, each one larger than most space stations, accompanied by 30 cruisers and a cloud of fighter craft that numbered in the hundreds. It was enough firepower to reduce a planet to rubble, and it was all focused on one tiny human frigate. Admiral Vextar, commander of the hegemony fleet, stood on the bridge of his flagship and studied the tactical display with growing confusion. Intelligence reports had indicated that a single primitive vessel had somehow defeated the Scaran raider fleet, but seeing the human ship with his own eyes made the report seem even more impossible. That, he said to his aide, pointing at the representation of the UNSC Defiant on the display. That tiny thing destroyed 17 raider ships? According to all reports, Admiral. The survivors are quite consistent in their accounts. Vextar clicked his beak in irritation. The Kronex were an ancient species, one of the founding members of galactic civilization, and they had built their empire on the principle of overwhelming technological superiority. The idea that some upstart species from a death world could challenge their carefully maintained order was not just insulting but genuinely incomprehensible. Open communications with the human vessel, he ordered. Captain. Chen received the transmission while making final preparations for what everyone aboard the Defiant knew would be their last battle. The math was simple and brutal. Even with all their advantages and tactical innovations, there was no way a single frigate could stand against an entire hegemony task force. Human vessel, this is Admiral Vextar of the Kronex hegemony. You have interfered with our operations in this sector and destroyed assets under our protection. You will surrender immediately and prepare to be destroyed as an example to others who would dare challenge our authority. Chen looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. These were people who had volunteered to serve aboard humanity's most dangerous assignments, knowing that they might be called upon to face impossible odds. They had never failed her before, and she knew they wouldn't fail her now. Admiral Vextar, this is Captain Chen. Those assets you're referring to were pirates attacking civilian non-combatants. If that's the kind of operation you're running, then I guess we know what kind of civilization you really are. The response was immediate and filled with the kind of arrogant rage that came from a species that had never been challenged by their supposed inferiors. You dare to question the Kronex hegemony? We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years while your species was still crawling in the mud of your death world. And yet, Chen replied with deadly calm, here we are. She turned to Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez. All weapons, prepare for full engagement. I want every system we have ready to go. Ma'am, Rodriguez said quietly. Even with everything we've got, the odds are… I know, Chen interrupted, but those 40,000 civilians are counting on us to buy them time to escape. And there's something else these Kronex need to learn about humanity. "What's that, Captain?" Chen smiled, and it was the kind of expression that had once made Earth's apex predators reconsider their life choices. They need to learn that when you corner a human, you don't get a prisoner. You get a problem. The battle began with the kind of overwhelming assault that the Kronex hegemony was famous for. 12 dreadnoughts opened fire simultaneously, filling space with enough destructive energy to sterilize a continent. It was the kind of display of force that had kept the galaxy in line for millennia. But the Defiant was no longer the same ship that had arrived in this system hours earlier. During the brief respite between battles, Chief Engineer Kowalski and his team had made modifications that pushed human technology beyond its theoretical limits. They had rerouted power systems, overcharged weapons arrays, and implemented what could only be described as controlled insanity in their ship's operation protocols. The human ship moved through the incoming fire like a dancer avoiding raindrops, its exotic matter drive creating localized distortions in spacetime that allowed for maneuvers that violated known laws of physics. Where other species had learned to build elegant, efficient ships, humanity had created vessels that could literally bend reality around them. Impossible. Admiral Vextar's voice cracked across the communications. "How are they moving like that?" "Admiral," his tactical officer reported with obvious distress. "Their ship appears to be generating gravitational anomalies. They're not just dodging our fire, they're redirecting it back at us." It was true. The Defiant had deployed a series of gravitational manipulation devices that created localized space-time distortions throughout the battlefield. Energy weapons that missed their target were caught in these gravity wells and redirected toward other hegemony ships, turning their own overwhelming firepower against them. 2 Kronex cruisers found themselves on the receiving end of their own quantum torpedoes, their shields failing under weapons fire that they had fired themselves. The coordination and precision required for such a tactic was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. But the humans weren't finished yet. As the Defiant wove through the hegemony formation, it deployed a series of devices that demonstrated humanity's unique approach to warfare. Instead of trying to match their enemy's technological superiority, they had chosen to make the battlefield itself their weapon. Space mines equipped with exotic matter warheads created pockets of altered physics where the normal laws of science simply stopped working. Kronex ships found their weapons failing to fire, their shields collapsing without taking damage, and their engines producing thrust in directions that shouldn't have been possible. "What kind of weapons are these?" Vextar demanded as his flagship systems began failing in ways that his engineers couldn't explain. "They're not weapons," Chen replied over the communications. "They're survival tools. You see, when you evolve on a planet that regularly violates the laws of physics, you learn to be creative." The truth was that every device the Defiant was using had originally been developed for peaceful purposes. The gravitational manipulators were designed for mining operations in asteroid fields. The exotic matter warheads were meant for terraforming planets. The space-time distortion generators were used to create safe zones around human colonies. But humanity had learned long ago that anything could be a weapon if you used it correctly, and they had spent centuries perfecting the art of turning defensive technologies into offensive capabilities. It was a lesson born from 4 billion years of evolution on a world that had never stopped trying to kill them. As the battle raged, something unprecedented began to happen. The Kronex Hegemony Task Force, one of the most powerful military formations in the galaxy, began to retreat. Not in an organized withdrawal, but in a panicked rout as ship after ship found itself crippled by weapons and tactics that didn't exist in any military manual. "Admiral," Chen transmitted as the human ship continued its impossible dance through the battlefield. "You came here to destroy us as an example. Instead, you're about to become one. The galaxy is going to learn that there are some species you don't threaten, some lines you don't cross, and some fights you don't pick." The Defiant accelerated toward the Kronex flagship with the kind of reckless courage that had carried humanity from the caves of Africa to the stars themselves. As it closed to point-blank range, Captain Chen made a decision that would echo through galactic history. "All hands, this is the captain. We came here to save lives, and we're going to finish the job. Today, the galaxy learns that humanity doesn't just survive. We thrive." The nuclear-pumped Gracer that struck Admiral Vextar's flagship burned with the light of a newborn star, and when the radiation cleared, the most powerful military force in the galaxy was in full retreat. They had come to make an example of the humans, but instead, they had become one themselves. As rescue ships from the Galactic Federation finally arrived to find the Defiant standing guard over the rescued civilians and the wreckage of 2 enemy fleets, word began to spread throughout the galaxy that something fundamental had changed. The humans, the newcomers from the Death World, had not just joined galactic civilization, they had redefined what it meant to be strong. And in the years that followed, when pirates threatened trade routes, when tyrants oppressed the innocent, and when the forces of chaos sought to destroy what civilized beings had built, there was a new response to calls for help. They called for reinforcements, and what showed up were Deathworlders. And that, as the galaxy would learn, made all the difference.